So with the regular championship season coming to an end yesterday, I thought now would be a good time to react to my predictions from the very start of the season. Now bear in mind when we do go through these predictions, I make them at the start of each season when there's still a month of the transfer window to go. And it goes without saying, the championship is one of, if not the most unpredictable leagues in the world, and that's why we all love it. There are some decent shouts in here and a few stinkers along the way. I want to hear from you guys in the comments down below as well, which teams have defied the odds the most for you this season. Let's go for 800 likes on today's video. Without any further ado, let's jump in. So predicted to finish bottom of the table by me, it was Oxford United, but they have defied my expectations by finishing 7 places higher than that, finishing in 17th. They'd obviously confirmed their status as a championship club prior to the final game of the season as well. And yeah, I have to tip my hat to Oxford really. It was a lot of transfer business they did over the summer, and if they didn't get that right, they very well could have fallen into the relegation trapdoor. The sort of question marks I had coming into this season with Oxford was obviously Josh Murphy leaving on a free transfer and how influential he'd been in the last few months of that League One season. Still a few question marks over Des Buckingham coming into this season as well, with him being an inexperienced coach in the championship. I actually thought Oxford were really competitive for the first few weeks, first couple months even of this season, but towards the end of Buckingham's time there, that was when it looked like things could have very easily unfolded and unravelled for Oxford in that sort of period. But Gary Rowett picked them up after that, done a really good job since, and yeah, a deserved 17th placed finish in the end. So 7 places out with Oxford. Predicted to go down in 23rd. I then had Blackburn Rovers. This is undoubtedly one of my worst predictions from the start of the season. They finished 16 places higher than that and just missed out on the playoffs on the final day of the season. Now, in fairness to me, if you cast your mind back to the start of the season, behind the scenes at Blackburn, there was a lot of unrest. Obviously, Sammy Smodick's leaving the club. When I made that prediction as well, the squad was sort of down to its bare bones. Funnily enough, after I made that prediction video, I think the very next day they signed about 5 players. But my biggest undoing with that Blackburn prediction was probably underestimating John Eustace, actually. I know he didn't manage Blackburn for the entire season, but the platform he left them with, just in terms of overall structure, I think I probably overlooked that at the start of the season, because if I'm being honest, I don't think Blackburn have the 7th best squad in the championship. I think they have overachieved in that regard, but it's a solid group of players. They definitely added to it towards the end of the window as well. And despite being involved in the relegation scrap last season, they were nowhere near that picture this year, were they? Predicted to finish in 22nd place, I had Plymouth, so I at least got one of the 3 relegated clubs in the bottom 3. I was only 1 place out with Plymouth in the end. Cast your mind back to the end of last season. They just survived on the final day after beating, I think it was Hull, wasn't it, at home park, and let's not, deny it, they were one of the most tipped sides for relegation as soon as they appointed Wayne Rooney. I, like a lot of people, was quite sceptical over that appointment, but I still saw the quality that was there in that squad. It's why I didn't have them predicted, rock bottom of the table like a few others. Definitely in the last few months of the season, I thought we saw that quality out of that Plymouth squad, certainly since they appointed Muclich. They got some massive results, especially against the top sides at home this season, but left it a little bit too late in the end, but only 1 place out with Plymouth, so that's my best prediction so far. I also think predicting Derby to finish in 21st place has come back as a decent prediction as well. Only 2 places out with Derby in the end. I just had a feeling that they'd have enough to get over the line this season. Now, obviously starting the season with Paul Warne, I think I, like a lot of other people at the time, brought up a few sort of question marks over that one. Not sure many people thought that Warne would see this full season out with Derby, and in the end they were right to make that change. A clear uptick in form since John Eustace took over. Once again, if you're stacking up Derby's squad pound for pound, it probably is down there, but having that reliable core of players, a decent track record at home, give or take, throughout the entire year as well, it was just enough to get them over the line, and that's what I thought as well. Down in 20th place, I had Watford. I was 6 places off with them in the end. What really cost me with this prediction was how well Watford actually started the season. I had a really bad feeling about them before the campaign had started, but up until about January, Tom Cleverley had them in playoff contention. It is worth pointing out in the second half of the season, no club picked up fewer points than Watford did, so we definitely saw a massive tail off towards the end of the campaign, and maybe that's something to read with Watford going into next season. But after a good start to the season, they gave themselves that solid foundation that while they were probably never good enough to fight for the top six, they've never been in any relegation danger this season either, have they? Like I thought they might have been. Predicted to finish in 19th place at the start of the season, I had Portsmouth. Not the worst shout in the world, they were 3 places higher than that, so slightly underestimated Pompey, if anything. I think everything considered, this has been a really successful season for Portsmouth, especially considering how they started the year, how tough some of their fixtures were off the bat. Thinking about when they went away to Stoke early on in the season, conceded 6 in that game, and you really thought that, oh, Pompey really could be up against it this season, but their record at Fratton Park has served them so well all season. Lots of goals in that side as well, which I think is always the key for newly promoted sides in trying to stay in the Championship. I did have Pompey as the highest performing of the newly promoted sides, and in the end that did come true as well, but slightly undershot them, albeit only by 3 places, so not a bad shout with that one. Predicted to finish in 18th place at the start of the season, I did have Stoke City, so this is the first prediction in this list that I got absolutely bob on, which I will take, obviously. Not been a season to remember for Stoke fans. I did have it as a slight regression from their finish last season. Listen, I don't think anyone could have predicted, back in July what Stoke fans would have been in store for this season. From starting the season with Steven Schumacher, then going to Narcis Pelac of all people, and then ending it with Mark Robbins. No one could have called that before a ball had been kicked, but somehow I managed to get them in their exact spot. Always feels like, regardless of the mood at Stoke at the start of the season, there's always going to be a bit of chaos along the way. So not a bad shout there from me, that one. Predicted to finish in 17th place, I had Swansea. I'm 6 places out on Swansea in the end, so not the best prediction. To be honest, for the sort of first 3 quarters of the season, it looked like this prediction could have been pretty on the nose. I still had a few question marks over Luke Williams coming into this campaign, the overall strength of that squad as well, which I just wasn't sure if it was ready to be in sort of playoff contention or anything like that. But the run towards the final few weeks of the season, since Alan Sheehan's taken over really, has really bumped Swansea up the league table, hasn't it? So for most of the year I thought I called Swansea fairly accurately, but that great run towards the end has meant that I was 6 places out with Swansea in the end. I was even further out when it came to calling Millwall. I had them predicted to finish down in 16th. Another one that was fairly tough to call at the start of the season. If you remember back to last year, they'd ended the campaign really well under Neil Harris, but there were still a few question marks over whether long-term he was going to be the right man to lead Millwall forward, and like has been the case in the last few seasons with Millwall, still had a bit of a question mark over how many goals they'd actually score this season. Now, it's funny really because the lack of goals has been a bit of an issue for Millwall all year. They're the 4th lowest scoring Championship side this season, but despite that, they've had a rock-solid defensive record, and since Alex Neil took over, he managed to get them into playoff contention, obviously. Just fell short on the final day in the end, but an 8th placed finish for Millwall isn't to be sniffed at. I was a fair bit out with them in the end. Predicted to finish in 15th place, I had Cardiff. Definitely overshot them. I was 9 places out with Cardiff in the end, who did finish rock bottom. Now, I still maintain that on paper, there's no chance that Cardiff squad should have finished bottom of the Championship, but when the people behind the scenes make bad footballing decisions, ultimately this is what it leads to. It does lead to relegation. They've been fairly solid throughout the entirety of last season, and I thought they had a solid enough platform to sort of build upon that. Don't get me wrong, I thought there would be a slight fall off from them this season. Last season I think they finished 12th, didn't they? But not to the extent that we've seen. It's just been everything unravelling for them. Started the season really poorly. Errol Bullock obviously paid the price for that, and since that point they were never really able to fully rectify the situation. So Cardiff were definitely a team that I overshot. This prediction I've got to be happy with though. I had QPR predicted to finish in 14th. In the end, they finished just 1 place lower than that, so only marginally out with QPR. And with a lot of these mid-table sides, it's all very tight at the end of the season as well. There's only a few points between 14th, 12th, 17th, all these sorts of positions, isn't there? So to be 1 or 2 places out isn't too bad. Had a feeling that there'd be gradual improvements from QPR this season compared to last season, and I think that's probably what we've got in the end. A solid group of players that's never really been entrenched in this relegation battle this season, but probably not with enough quality to properly break the barrier of those sides above them. Now, this was one of the seasons where I did overshoot my own team. I had Preston to finish in 13th place. I was 7 places out with North End in the end. Now, to be fair, for a fair bit of this season, having North End predicted to finish in 13th didn't look like too shabby of a prediction, really. Obviously, the start of the season for North End was an absolute mess, with Ryan Lowe leaving after 1 game. It took Paul Heckingbottom a little bit of time to get his feet under the table, but once we got to sort of February, around that time, we were looking pretty comfortable for a sort of lower mid-table sort of finish, but then the dreadful run of form in the final few months of the season just dragged us straight into that relegation scrap, which really we had no business being involved in, but it was all our own doing. Thankfully, we managed to get out of it on the final day, finished in 20th, but it was definitely an under-par season for North End, and I think there's a lot of work that needs to go on there now behind the scenes to ensure we're not in a similar situation next season. But 7 places out with North End, I want to say that's one of my worst predictions for where I had us predicted to compared to where we finished. I'm usually quite accurate when it comes to predicting Preston. One team that I was exactly on the nose with, though, was Sheffield Wednesday. I had them predicted to finish in 12th. In the end, that's exactly where they finished. There was a good buzz going on around Hillsborough at the start of the season. Certainly felt like the club was moving in the right direction after what was a really chaotic year last season with the Great Escape under Danny Röhl. Felt like the club would make gradual strides forward this season, and I feel like that's what we've got. Once again, looking at the squad, I never felt like there was probably enough quality there to challenge those sides above them, but never in any danger of going down this season worthy. I'll take that prediction every day of the week. In hindsight, this Hull City prediction doesn't look too good, does it? I had them predicted to finish in 11th. In the end, they were 10 places lower than that, finishing in 21st place. Now, Hull were a really tough one to predict, especially with a month of the transfer window still to go. Obviously, they'd lost Greaves and Philogene. It felt like the club was still going to be really active in maybe not spending all of those transfer fees, but at least getting in some high quality loanees like they did last season. What I probably didn't realise when predicting Hull was the sort of financial situation of the club and how much they'd actually put in to last season in trying to get promoted. Obviously, the managerial change didn't go to plan either, and they just about scraped survival on the final day. So yeah, I was quite a way out with Hull in the end. Bristol City did manage to get over the line and into the top 6. I had them finishing in 10th place. I thought it would be another season of gradual improvement from Bristol City. I just wasn't completely sure whether or not they'd have enough to get over the line and into the top 6, but more than happy to be proven wrong with that. I will say what I do think has definitely helped Bristol City this season, and all of the clubs going for the playoffs, is that the threshold for getting into the top 6 has been considerably lower this season than it has been in previous years. You know, Bristol City ended this season with 68 points. A few years ago, if you pick up 68 points, that'll probably get you, what, 8th, 9th maybe? This season, though, it was good enough for the top 6. They've really relied on that home form at Ashton Gate. But I'm really looking forward to seeing them in the playoffs, and I hope they've got something in store for us, because, yeah, would be brilliant to see them in the Premier League. I then had Sunderland predicted to finish in 9th place. Once again, quite a tough side to call at the start of the season, especially when you cast your mind back to last summer. Sunderland finished 16th in the Championship last season and were one of the most out-of-form sides in the entirety of England throughout the second half of that campaign. They were absolutely awful second half of last season, Sunderland, but you looked at that squad, how much potential there was there, and you thought that if everything did gel and click, they definitely have a shout of playoff contention. Certainly for the first half of the season, though, they managed to defy all sorts of expectations and were keeping pace with Leeds, Burnley and Sheffield United going for automatic promotion, obviously. Ended up dropping off towards the end of the campaign, but a finish of 4th is not to be sniffed at for Sunderland whatsoever. I know they're not exactly going into the playoffs with the best amount of momentum. You know, I think it's 5 games they've lost on the bounce now. But compared to where a lot of people had them predicted at the start of the season, it's still been a good campaign for Sunderland if you zoom out, without doubt. Let's just see how the playoffs go for them now. Predicted to finish in 8th place, I had Norwich City. I still stand by that being a fine prediction. I look at that Norwich squad, how much talent is in there, how many goals they've got in that team especially, and I think that Norwich definitely had the quality in their ranks to push for a place in the top 6 in the end, but it was such a drop off in the second half of the season, ultimately finishing 13th. I was out by 5 places in the end. Defensively this season, they've just been too easy to get at. Only 5 sides have conceded more goals than Norwich have, so a fair bit off with the Canaries in the end. Predicted to just miss out on the top 6, I had West Brom. I was 2 places off with the Baggies in the end. They finished a little bit further back in the pecking order, finishing in 9th place. Now with West Brom, they didn't do a ton of transfer activity, especially early on in the window, but they still had Carlos Corberán at the start of the season, a solid group of players that I thought would definitely be in playoff contention. But with Corberán especially, there was always a feeling that maybe he could be poached away if the right opportunity came up, and obviously did end up leaving in December. And I thought that stacked up against some of the other fellow promotion chasers, West Brom may just fall short this season. So not a bad prediction there with West Brom, only 2 places out with that. Predicted to finish in 6th place by me, I had Sheffield United, 3 places out, so not the worst prediction in the world in terms of overall league placements, but there was no way Sheffield United were ever going to finish as low as 6, you know, and that was pretty obvious as soon as we were a month or so into the season. They were well within reach of automatic promotion throughout the entire campaign, weren't they? But before a ball had been kicked, those weren't really the narratives that were going on around Sheffield United. Think about how badly that Premier League season had gone for them last season. There were definitely question marks over Chris Wilder coming into this season as well, and whether or not he still had it at the Championship to deliver a promotion or get a side into that situation. Think of the massive squad turnover. You put on the uncertainty of the takeover in the summer as well, the fact that the Blades were working with a 2-point deduction as well. Listen, Sheffield United fans ultimately, you know, no doubt will have been disappointed to have missed out on the top 2, given they kept pace with Leeds and Burnley all season, but compared to a lot of people's expectations from the start of the season, I definitely think Sheffield United have gone above and beyond them this season, but we'll wait and see how the playoff campaign goes before fully commenting on how well this season's gone for them. Predicted to finish in 5th place by me was Middlesbrough. To be honest, I'm not too mad at that prediction. They finished 10th in the end, but I think you'd struggle to find many other predictions on YouTube, social media, wherever, where anyone had Middlesbrough as low as 10th at the start of the season. Thinking about the strength of that squad coming into this year, the fact that Carrick is now a well-established Championship manager, got, you know, a few seasons under his belt of experience at Middlesbrough, how many goals everyone was predicting them to score at the start of the season and things like that. I was 5 places out with Borough in the end, but I still think at the start of the campaign predicting them to finish in 5th wasn't a bad shout, if that makes sense. I do think they've definitely underperformed by finishing as low as 10th. I think that's really poor for a squad that's got that much quality in. I'm definitely happy with this prediction though. Predicted to finish in 4th place, I had Coventry. They were just 1 place lower than that. Now, the first few months of the season, I definitely thought that I might have had a bit of a howler with this one, with things just not clicking for Coventry in the opening months of the season. Ultimately, Mark Robins paid the price for that. But the turnaround has been absolutely massive under Frank Lampard, obviously, beating Middlesbrough on the final day to secure that place in the top 6 as well. And listen, the playoffs is up for grabs. It's anyone's to win right now, but I think Coventry have got a really good chance of definitely making it to Wembley when you consider they're going up against a really out-of-form Sunderland side in the semi-finals. But there was definitely a feeling that Coventry were on the cusp of something at the start of the season. They'd just fallen short of the top 6 last year, but gave it a really good run in the FA Cup. I think most people probably had them inside the top 6, didn't they? So yeah, not too bad of a shout. But undoubtedly the worst prediction of this entire video was having Luton Town predicted to finish in 3rd place, when in actuality they finished 22nd and were relegated on the final day. I was out by 19 places with Luton. In my entire history of making YouTube videos and doing these predictions at the start of the season, that's got to be one of my biggest howlers. Now, to be fair to me, I don't think anyone saw this coming at the start of the season. The vast majority of content creators, Championship fans, even Watford fans would have had Luton predicted to finish in the top 6 before a ball had been kicked. They were the best performing of the 3 sides that were coming down from the Premier League last season. They kept hold of the core group that have performed relatively well in the Premier League despite relegation, but they've just not been able to shift that bad momentum, have they? The club probably did stick with Rob Edwards for a little bit too long. There definitely was a turnaround under Matt Bloomfield in the final few weeks of the season, but too little too late, and with that capitulation against West Brom on the final day, saw them finishing in 22nd place. So I was miles out with Luton. But you might have guessed it, from this point onwards, the predictions definitely do get a lot better. Predicted to finish in 2nd place, I had Burnley. That's exactly where they finished in the end. Now, to be fair with Burnley, there was quite a big turnaround of their squad in the last month of the transfer window. A lot of outgoings, some new players coming in as well, but with the core group of that squad and the quality that was there, with a manager like Scott Parker, who I totally get is still a bit of a polarising name in the Championship, you just can't argue against his record. That's now 3 full seasons he's had in the Championship and 3 promotions on his CV with 3 different clubs as well. You had the feeling that Burnley, at both ends of the pitch, had the quality this season to get over the line. Still a lot of players in that Burnley squad who were there from their previous promotion under Vincent Kompany as well. And, I mean, 100 points and to finish 2nd is quite crazy, I'm not going to lie. But, yeah, we'll take that one every day. But claiming the top spot, both for me and in real life, it was Leeds United. I did have them predicted as the title winners, and in the end, that's exactly how it finished. Just pipping Burnley to the title on goal difference, but a 100-point campaign. And I think what most people saw with Leeds and Burnley at the start of the season wasn't just the quality of their squads, but the quality of the managers in the Championship as well. With Daniel Farke and Scott Parker, they're serial winners at this level. I know that towards the end of last season, Leeds obviously had that bit of a capitulation and couldn't get over the line in the playoffs, but despite losing probably their 3 best players from last season, Archie Gray, Crescencio Somerville and Jorginho Rutter, they probably still had the best squad in the Championship coming into this season as well. They added to it well in the transfer market. And listen, I'm not going to take too much praise for predicting Leeds to win the league because they were the overwhelming favourites with a lot of people at the start of the season anyway. But predicting the top 2 spot on, I'll take that. But there you guys have it. Those were my Championship predictions from the start of the season. As you can see, some definitely have aged better than others. But as always, I'd love to get your take in the comments down below. What were some of your best and worst predictions from the start of the season? Do let me know. Apart from that though, guys, that will wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe if you are new around here, and I'll see you all in the next one.